here we go. And we're live. All right. So it's always a little weird knowing exactly when, but now we are streaming live on Facebook. So we have reconvened. Interview with Chloe, take 2.
Yes, thanks everybody.
So glad to be here with you.
I'm in New Mexico, so I thought that we were on at 4:30, not ending at 4:30. So New Mexico is 2 hours behind y'all in the east.
Yes. Yeah. And we have viewers from all over, even internationally. So, awesome. So all different time zones, confusion happens easily. So I'm so excited to be here with you. And perhaps we'll get even more viewers coming on now that they've been primed. We'll see. So we have my dad is watching.
Hi, Dad.
Hi, Dad. And Carrie, yay. So we'll see if more folks come on here. So Chloe and I are going to have a little conversation, but you all are welcome to type in questions and ask away. So I'm very excited to have this conversation with Chloe today. And so thanks for being here, Chloe.
Thank you. Hi, Facebook. Hi, everyone. It's just nice to have conscious conversations right now, especially with everything going on in the world, and to have connection, and
yes.
So I consider this just a point of connection. And my original connection with you, Hannah, was so great. We were in a conference together and I'm like, I need to talk to that girl. I've got to make my way over there, because I'm just highly intuitive, right? So I'm always like, where are my people in this room? There weren't too many of them in that particular room, but yes, you were one of them. So
yes, I think we recognized each other as kindred spirits there.
Yeah.
So let me formally introduce you to our audience here. So I'm just going to read your little bio that I edited down a little bit. So Chloe Rachel Gallaway is the founder of the Winged. You say winged or winged?
Winged
River
Writer.
Winged River Writer, and the best-selling author of The Soulful Child, 12 Years in the Wilderness, which I have right here, and you probably have your copy too. All right.
Yay.
Chloe's unusual life of growing up deeply connected to nature and spirit while transcending trauma and embodying empowerment has led her to become a dynamic writing coach. She offers a unique, intuitive approach combined with the craft of writing to help people find the power in their story. And this is what we're going to dive into today. The writing of her memoir became the foundation for her business and enabled her to become a warrior for helping others to discover the writer within. She is a transformational leader, a speaker, and retreat facilitator, hosting retreats in New Mexico, Sedona, Arizona, and Costa Rica. A big believer in the power of owning our voice, Chloe has supported the dreams of many authors to write their memoirs and become published. So really excited to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let's start just with a brief overview of your story, just so people know a little bit more about your background and where you're coming from.
Yeah, I was raised in the wilderness from birth to age 12. My mother gave birth to 6 children in the wilderness. And people say to me, what does that mean in the wilderness? Well, I mean, very isolated, remote wilderness at the top of a mountain in northern New Mexico. No running water, no electricity, no outside amenities, no schooling in the sense of formal schooling. We grew all of our own food. We had horses and chickens and donkeys. I think you met my donkey in the book.
So yes, I was so sad. He just died.
I know. Well, so the themes in The Soulful Child really are very spiritual, and there's a lot of thematic story around loss and grief. And of course, coming out of the end of the book, how we get through that and how we transcend loss and grief. But Tawny Jack, my donkey, was one of my first losses. And but sort of that's the background where the story takes place, is in the wilderness where I was raised. And then there's a whole backstory with my parents, of course, and how we got there and who they are. And so,
so they decided to step out of mainstream culture and create a family away from from civilization, basically.
Yeah.
And yeah, very, very powerful. And I highly recommend the book, everybody. It's an amazing story. And I'm only halfway through it. So I
Yeah.
told her, I know there's a bunch coming that's going to be
Yeah.
really powerful. And I know there's a shift where you all leave, and that was not the plan. So
Exactly. So there's a big
yeah.
shift coming, and hence I lived in the wilderness till 12, and then I came into society at 12 years old. It's a perfect time to come into society, age 12, right? I'm let's just drop you right into the middle of everything at 12 years old.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of funny. It's kind of funny, but anyway.
Well, I'm glad you can see it that way. So
Yeah.
if we're tying, so this group that we're doing this interview in is focused on yoga and Ayurveda. And so these sister sciences are really focused on self-knowledge, right? And discovering the full gamut of who we are, body, mind, and
Yes.
spirit.
Yes.
So I'd love for you to just to talk about, like, how do we come to know ourselves better and see ourselves more clearly through writing as a tool of self-exploration and intimacy?
Absolutely. Well, writing for me is a deep subconscious unearthing. So the intuitive process, is different than the craft process. And I've studied both. Well, I'm really self-learned as an intuitive healer, and through my experiences growing up, and then different trainings and things that I've done in my life. But the craft side is something that I studied. And I would say craft is more like it's a left brain sort of more scientific approach, if you will, to the writing process, right? Where it's linear, like we have the definitions of craft and we're breaking them down to understand them. But the intuitive side is really the side that is most transformational for me. It's that deep soul. So it's like I'm in communication with my soul and the subconscious part of me that that knows. I say the soul knows, right? Hence why mind, body, spirit is so important, because if we're just focusing on the body or just the mind, we're missing an entire entity to the wholeness, right? That actually births us, whether it's teaching yoga or, you're coaching somebody in a practice or even a farmer. And no matter who you are, I feel like it has to be encompassing, right? Which is the mind, body, spirit. So the intuitive side of the writing really is like the spirit. It's that this working between myself and the whole entire workings of universe, God, whatever you might call it.
Great. Yeah.
Pretty
There it
amazing.
is. It really makes me, all of these pieces remind me of the saying, which so I lived at Satchitananda ashram for a summer, and the kind of ashram slogan is truth is one, paths are many. And that there's many different ways to the top of the mountain, right?
Yes.
But we're all trying to get to that deeper truth. And I really love how you see writing as being one of the avenues to getting there. Do you want to say anything more about that?
No, just that I agree, and that there are many paths, and like yoga and in the way we interact in the world and what we eat. So food is medicine, and how we interact with our body, and it's all a piece of it, right? And so I like to incorporate all that stuff in my retreats, actually, because I think it enhances the process. So it's a togetherness thing, not a like one is better than the other, right? And I really want to say that to us entrepreneurs and light workers and all of us in the world that are making an impact, because I so much believe that every voice is needed. So everything that you're doing is so absolutely needed, and everything that I'm doing is needed, right? Yeah. And yet we're trying to help people get on a pathway. Some people are totally lost in their direction and where do I go, right? And we're just trying to help people get on a pathway to get going toward the mountain, if you will, right?
Yeah. To know that the mountain's there.
and then sort of walking them there if we can, but we all need each other. We all need each other. So yeah,
so true. So along those lines, so the stories that we tell ourselves are what truly forms our reality, right? Like what we believe about our lives and other people and our place in the world and everything. So how does that bode for us moving forward in our world right now? How do you see the power of story in light of being in a global pandemic and lots of
Yeah. It's
inequities rising to the surface?
wow, it's just huge. I mean, I call it the narrative, right? So as a writer, there's narrative, which is the workings of story that carry the story forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we don't often think that we're walking around with a particular narrative, which we are. So we walk around with a narrative of our past story that's been lived.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that we may not be aware of that narrative. We might be aware of parts of it. I call it the fragmented story. So the level of awareness that you have of your story and the narrative that's running, right, is going to be dependent on your own growth and your own consciousness and your own workings in through your life. To even know that you have a narrative that's running, right? Like, how do I think and feel about my story, and how is that impacting my behaviors, and how is it impacting my belief systems, and then thus the life that is living right in front of me, right?
Yeah.
So we're already dealing with that, of course, with everything that's been lived. So now you're adding in like a whole other layer that I feel like is triggering the wounds
Mm.
of the narrative that's already been lived.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a painful witnessing to watch all the triggering happening. And
Mm.
I feel like, wow, I'm like in one huge, dare I say, dysfunctional marriage on some days when I'm on Facebook. Now it's not always like this, but I think there's that propensity, toward the pain body that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a ton of consciousness and work and love too that's being spread. So it's a grand mix of things, right? And the only thing I can say is that I feel like coming into knowing ourselves and understanding the narrative that we run about our story already, the one that's been lived, is really important and valuable to ground ourselves for the story ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Because we want to
Absolutely.
handle those triggers, right? We want to be in the best position possible, dealing with the things that already trigger us, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
even seeing this as an opportunity. This is a grand opportunity to really open up to the possibility. If we don't close our heart in and shut our heart down, how can we remain opened at the heart center while guarding ourselves in a sense? Because I do believe like
Mm.
there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of going on. It's not our job to take on everybody else's pain or consciousness or whatever is happening, right? It's not our job to take on belief systems that might be being pushed at us. It's
Mm.
our job to get to know ourselves better.
Yeah.
That's where the power is going to come, I believe, Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's your work too. It's like, let me bring
Absolutely.
you back to yourself. I call it returning to the roots of the self.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you're going to get your strength. So I don't know what it's going to look like, but I know you can get great strength if you can return to the roots of yourself, and you can do it with the mind and the body and the spirit, right? So the food you eat, the yoga practice that you're teaching is like bringing people backward into themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I do with story as well. That's what I do with writing and with my practice.
Mm. So I'm curious about that in terms of the big shift. Like we're in a shift just globally right now.
Yes.
And you experience this very personally of like living in one reality for 12 years and then all of a sudden totally different reality, totally different rules, totally different expectations. And what I'm curious if there's like, if you've ever like laid out the many different stories you could tell about that, right? Like you have this book that you've written, which is one progression of that story, but
Right.
I'm sure there are many other versions of it that you could tell too from different perspectives
Oh,
of your
absolutely.
lived experience. So will you just talk about that a little bit? Is that a
Yeah,
good
no,
lead in?
absolutely.
Okay.
Wow. I mean, that's huge. And coming from one reality, where I was totally disconnected from the world, I was living connected to the land, really like barefoot in the dirt, following a herd of goats out up the mountain, really connected intuitively. So living from a place of, instead of a place of thinking in my head all the time, I'm living from the place of feeling. Because when you're born into nature, where, you know, we had this one room little cabin and 8 of us lived in there, and dirt floors. And my dad just put this together, you know, as quickly as he could, cutting down trees and getting, you know, boards up and whatnot before winter hit really hard on us. And we were outside in the snow for like a couple of weeks or something. But when you live in that kind of environment, you live from the gut instinct, right? Which is intuition, because that's what keeps you alive.
Mm-hmm.
That's what, you know, if I step outside the door to go to the bathroom, for those that might have to whine about going to the bathroom at night, I did have to go, you know, either right outside my door to pee if it was just peeing, or walk all the way to the outhouse, right? And the senses are so important. Like, am I sensing a mountain lion or a bobcat that's right outside my door? Because you have to pick that up with sensory before you do it with the eyes, to be honest.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So I'm just giving a picture of the distinct difference of living in that environment and being raised in that, which I think is part of my gift as an intuitive coach, is I'm so able to get there. And then my work is to help you get there. But coming into the world, well, first of all, I was in the middle of trauma, because there were some really heavy circumstances that took place with my family, and my parents' relationship was falling apart, and we were in isolation with a very volatile situation. So I was in the middle of that trauma, and then entering the world, it was like another layer of trauma, because the world is so busy. So imagine that. Imagine realizing that just the pure overstimulation and busyness actually adds trauma to us.
Yeah.
Overstimulated central nervous system. Right? What are you doing every time you bring people to yoga every morning? It's like, let me just calm your nervous system, right? People are like, oh, I'm all over the place. What do they call it? A hot mess, right? It's like, but for me, it makes me almost cry, you know, because I know and I can feel in my body how distinctly different it is to be in that calm state and then come into an overstimulated environment.
Yeah.
Of course, I was totally unprepared at 12 with that. And then I was dealing with the trauma, and I was starting school, and I was placed in foster care. So my entire life was uprooted.
Yeah. You were separated from your family.
I was separated from my parents and from my brothers, who were, I say in the book, like they were my glue to my identity initially. But I'm not going to give away the rest of the story, because you're going to read that part. But speaking to the transition through things, right? I mean, now, of course, I feel like that's the power in looking back at your story and like unearthing it, is understanding the power that you got from the circumstances.
Yeah.
So I definitely feel a little more prepared because I can look back at that and go, wow, I transcended that, and then that, and then that. Of course, I can't see exactly ahead of where we're going right now. So I'm still scared and nervous a bit in dealing with a lot of changes and shifts and things. I have a lot of sadness and grief over how much life has changed already and like what's coming. But I can identify that with moving, you know, from the wilderness into society and then into foster care, and that totally just being hit all the time. And again, a couple of things that I know so powerfully. One is the spiritual connection, right? I always had a deep, profound spiritual connection because of how I was raised. And so I feel like I was able to move into that. I'm definitely more able to move into that now. And I believe in it. I mean, I believe in like spiritual warfare, and there are angels behind our backs, and there are, you know, we are not alone. We are not alone. So for people that feel like they're alone right now, you know, we are not alone. So that's one thing. And I'm the type of person that tends to lean toward, of course, transcendence, you know, because transcending so much in my own life and my own story, I believe that we can transcend what's happening, but there's no hiding from it. It's like, I feel like that getting to know yourself and that coming home to the roots of the self are so vital, because it's going to be your way through the storm. I don't think anybody's going to be able to move around this or outside of this storm that we're being hit with.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk with you too is that, um, I practice and I teach Ayurveda, which is about living in rhythm with nature,
Yeah.
right? And for those of us that didn't grow up as you did, which is all
Yes.
of us, um, that and some of us I grew up in rural Western North Carolina and swam in the river and went
Mm,
backpacking and all those things, but still wasn't living. I was going to public school and living in a house
right.
with electricity and everything. What's interesting to me is to read about like in the poetic way that you write about it, and just like how you capture the image of the cherry tree blooming in the spring, like
Mm,
that's the image of spring to you, or that
yeah. Yeah.
there's these rhythms that you were aware of as a young child that happened in the natural world that meant certain things to you in terms of what you would do in your
Yes.
behaviors and your interactions in the world around you. It was time for XYZ, right?
Yep.
And so it's interesting now in that I'm teaching and
Yes.
living, still learning myself, how we live in alignment with the seasons, because our culture is set up, like you said, to be overstimulating to the nervous system, and for us to really push nature away, and to
Yes.
think that we should and will live the same way year round, eat the same foods year round, have the same activities year round, get up at the same time, go to
Right,
bed, right?
making it more of a mechanical sort of autopilot
Right,
process, which moves us away from the natural intuition and instinct,
right,
and the understanding that needs to happen, which is just such. It's so amazing that you're teaching this. It's so needed. It's so needed in the world, right? I mean,
yes, thank you.
I even need it, even though I understand it, because
Hmm.
I've been removed from it for a long time and went through like my
Right.
period of rebellion of like my dad didn't know what he was talking about.
Hmm.
I'm going to eat McDonald's. Like
Right.
that was years back, but I did
Yeah.
go through that stage, went through McDonald's like a whole summer during college and played
Mm.
Monopoly and ordered French fries every day. Um, so bad, so bad for me, right? But so I mean, a lot of people don't even know why that might be bad or why
Hmm.
things are not okay because we're living through that narrative in the experience of our environment, right?
Yeah.
So we just need to do our part, and you're doing your part really to bring people back. And do you want to know if it's vital to live within the rhythm of nature and season? Absolutely. It will totally transform your life if we could live in the rhythm of the sun going down and the sun coming up. You know what that would mean? That means you would have no technology at all, because
Right.
that interferes with the body's natural rhythm, right?
Yeah.
To go to sleep properly. So we have all these sleep issues, and people just don't realize because it's just normal. I'm on my computer and I'm on my phone, I'm on this, I'm on that. And we just have
Right.
so many things that are pulling us in the wrong direction away from the rhythm. And then we want to know why we're so
Right.
unhappy or why our
Preach
body's
it,
so
sister. Preach
uncomfortable.
it.
Like, why does my body listen? And I'm not perfect. I want people to
Right.
know, like, I mean, I am struggling in my life too, like, because I am living in the world and
Right.
I am trying to find my balance of everything that I know and everything that I was raised in. And I've been doing this my whole life. This is what my second book is about. I'm writing a
Hmm.
second memoir now.
Mm.
And it's like, how do I do this? Am I going to choose what my dad and mom chose, which was totally
Mm.
to live outside the world? Or am I going to plant a stake in the ground and be here? And how am I going
Hmm.
to do
Mm. Mm. I can't wait to read that book.
it? Yeah. So, but living in the rhythm and the seasons, I'm telling you, your body will be transformed. Your
Yeah.
mind will be transformed. Um, I don't know if there's a lot of other people doing what you're doing, but I hope that a lot more people will get on board and follow along with what you're teaching, Hannah. Because
Yeah, I hope so too. It's like miraculous. People heal. I mean, they do heal, but it's, no drugs, no surgery, no,
yes,
and it seems too easy almost just by realigning with their natural constitution, you know?
Right. But
Like,
it takes some boundary setting, let's be
yeah,
honest, right? Because you're raised in an environment that's like, let's set up this mechanical thing and you work this
right,
many hours and we don't care about fall coming and spring coming and winter coming,
right. And
and like
productivity above all else.
productivity above all else, which actually leads to less productivity.
Right.
And the research even shows that now for people that are very much about the science of things, right?
Yeah.
So establishing and reestablishing patterns and rhythms will transform life for so many people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. One last question. Can you believe we've talked for a half an hour already?
We could go on for an hour for sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Last
So
question.
what,
Let's do it. What is
all
it?
right. So when you work with people to write their own stories for people that are interested in this and it might feel a little intimidating, what what would you say to people that are like, I'm curious to explore what my story is and I have no idea what would come out, you know?
Yeah. Well, there's a ton of fear just initially for people when they think
Yeah.
about writing their story. Many people actually, I think, do want to write their story, but don't consider themselves a writer and think, well, that's for somebody that's a writer. 82% of people statistically actually want to write a book, and only 2% of people do it. So that kind of gives me an inkling into like, there's a big desire there to actually
Yeah.
know ourselves through our story, but there's so much resistance and it looks like so many things. It looks like a busy life and a busy career and maybe being a mom and maybe being a dad and all the things that are coming, or the mindset that I'm not a writer and all those different things, right? So the first point is just to get still with yourself. Because for me, when I wrote The Soulful Child, I call it like a soul whisper. And I got still enough to actually hear the whisper that was going on inside. That was like, my story matters. So people have to understand that their story means something. First of all, it means something to them. Because if they have a fragmented story, which most of us do, it just varies in the levels of that, right? Of how much they've integrated it and understand it, and versus just compartmentalizing it to survive,
Yeah.
So understanding that your story matters and just getting still enough to listen from the inside. I do want to connect to my story. Then if it's like, okay, I've gotten that far, but I don't know anything about writing or whatnot, I'm super happy for people to reach out to me about writing. I actually have a really fun thing that I would love to give away to your people.
Yeah,
And
let us know. How can we interact with you and where can we
yeah,
find
well,
you?
so I have something called story medicine. I like to say to people, you're healed enough to be somebody else's story medicine. And then the question is, what medicine will your story bring? And so just answering that question, what medicine might my story bring? Oh my God, and thinking about the people that you love initially, but then humanity at large, right? Think about what medicine your story might bring. So I would love to, I can just send it to you and you can put it in the link for people. But the story medicine piece is just a way to help people connect to their story and ask themselves some questions. And if you get to the place where you actually do want to write it, I want to just say this. The writer is actually within you. If you can just understand that, the writer lives within you. Your work really is to clear all the barriers, all the limiting beliefs, the obstacles really that are in the way for you getting to the heart of yourself where the writer lives. And that's the work that I do. But if anybody even just can just get to the place on their own, they're gonna feel it. They will sense that writer within.
Great. So where can people find you if they're interested in connecting with you?
Yeah, so find me on Facebook because that's easy. Chloe Rachel Gallaway, and author Chloe Rachel Gallaway. And then the book is on Amazon, and we're in 6 countries now. So if you're in other countries, I believe if you just Google The Soulful Child, 12 Years in the Wilderness, because there's different Amazon links and stuff in different countries. But in the US, it's really easy. Just go on Amazon, The Soulful Child, 12 Years in the Wilderness. And also people can just look up my website if they want to just browse around, and it's easy. It's chloerachelgallaway.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a guest today. I'm glad it worked out after
Thank you,
all.
Hannah. Thank you. Thank you, you guys. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and let's reconnect again because I love the work you're doing.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Likewise.
we're going to keep sharing. So,
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for all the wisdom and beauty that you shared with us today. And all
thank
the
you.
people out there watching and that will watch, a lot of people will watch this as a
Yes.
replay.
All right.
So
Thank you.
we'll post links below. All right. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bless you guys. Bless you.
Bye.